Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, hello.
Yes, I'm excited to have you, excited for this conversation. So, I would love to begin with you sharing a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, well, my name is Dyneco Gibson, and I a little bit about myself. I am an introvert, but when I am with people, I do enjoy it, and I always manage to have a good time. But I am a little bit of an introvert. But right now, my current role in my job is I register people to vote. And that has been something I've been doing for the last year, and I've really enjoyed it. I've always worked with young people in some capacity, so this was very new for me, but it's something I've really enjoyed. So I live in Pennsylvania, and I've lived here for about 10 years. Previously, I lived in Rochester, New York, for 20 years. So I have one daughter, and next month I will be turning 50 or in February. So, a couple more months, I'll be turning 50.
Amazing. Amazing. So, I would love for you to just take us back on your journey to motherhood and share with us your infertility journey.
Okay. As long as I can remember, and I mean, it sounds strange sometimes when people say, as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a mother. But I mean, I just thought that would just happen naturally. I never thought that it would be an issue. And I, struggled with getting pregnant. I actually got pregnant in as a teenager, and that was a challenge in itself. And I had the baby lived until or I had her prematurely at 6 months, and she unfortunately only lived an hour. At that time, that was in 1988, so we had no idea all the things that we're kind of knowing now about my body and what was going on. And so I just felt like when I found my husband, that it would just be easy, the timing would be right, everything would be right. And it wasn't. We had tried, we were married for tried at least for like 8 years, and we're really struggling. We did fertility drugs, we saw a specialist, and we were just really unsuccessful with that, with the pregnancy attempts. So we moved to artificial insemination, and that worked. Unfortunately, I have a kink in my tube, and so the baby was I had a tubal pregnancy, and they were forced to terminate the pregnancy, which was, difficult for me, because I was just like, oh, I just wanted to be a mother. And so we figured, one of the steps they talked about was either taking the tube or to just move straight to in vitro fertilization, because they figured if I got pregnant again, that it's a possible chance that it would get stuck in the tube again. So we did move to in vitro fertilization, and that was a situation where I felt like I was the only Black person in the room. When I would go to those appointments, I didn't see a lot of people there that looked like me, and so I didn't even have a lot of people to kind of talk to. Now it's more of a subject that's being discussed, which is great, because you don't feel so alone. It's already a really difficult time, managing to be, your life as a wife, and also just your regular life, and then going into this and having nobody really to kind of share with, or to get information from, can be difficult, can be lonely at times. And then just the emotional roller coaster. Our fertility clinic did a great job discussing some of the things that I would feel, and things like that. But certainly you have no idea until you are in that situation what it really is, and the emotions, and not to mention you're on so many different drugs that plays a part into it as well. So we did do in vitro fertilization in 2004. We had an attempt, and that's when with the artificial insemination, I had the tubal. In 2005, we decided to do the IVF, and I had my son, and everything looked like it was going well. And I went to my doctor, and she said, your cervix is open. I would like for you to go home, rest, and we're going to put a cerclage in. So I thought, okay, we're still doing really well. Unfortunately, and this is one of the things where you start to think, like, are Black women being taken seriously in this situation? One of the things is what should have happened at that time was, when I went to that appointment, the doctor should have said, listen, let's send you over to the hospital, get this cerclage in right away. It happened to be it happened to be a Friday. That Monday was a holiday. And so she had scheduled to do the cerclage on a Tuesday. It was 4 o'clock. I felt like, looking back, that maybe she just wanted to go home and felt like, it's the weekend, it's a holiday, let's just put this off. Well, I went home, and I ended up delivering on that Monday, the day before I was supposed to get the cerclage. And so my son was 24 weeks, and he was 24 weeks, but he did not live. And so I was just like, what's happening? And unfortunately, they want you to have two, if before they do a permanent cerclage, you have to have two premature deliveries, because sometimes they feel like it might have just kind of been a fluke and that. So anyway, we did in vitro again. We used 2 embryos, and this time we used frozen embryos with this one, and I got pregnant with twins. And I was very excited, but I looked at my doctor, and I can tell that she was struggling with this situation. We knew that I had incompetent cervix, so she had planned to do the surgery, and we did actually get the surgery. Excuse me. So we got the surgery with the twins at about 13 weeks, but because of the weight of them, it didn't hold. So I ended up going into the hospital, and the goal was for me to stay I went in the hospital at about 5 months, and I was going to stay in the hospital until I had the twins. And while I was there, my cervix still continued to open, and then I ended up having an infection. So they came up with this plan. Oh, we're going to deliver one, and maybe try to put and keep the other one in there. They did everything they could to try to help me through this process. Excuse me. When they did the test of the sacs, and they were both in 2 separate sacs, they realized that the other twin had an infection as well. And so they decided that they needed to deliver the babies. My blood pressure was high. They tried all kinds of things before that, but it just the best result was that I needed to deliver the babies. And so of course, they were born early, and also died probably within the hour. So then we continued, and I have to say, at that with the twins, I kind of was like, all right, God, this is it. I don't want to do this anymore. Emotionally, it was so hard, and I just didn't want to go through it anymore. I just didn't want, I was tired. I was just really tired, and I just felt like my body had failed me, and that I didn't know what else to do, that we had tried so many things, and I didn't know what else to do. So we did speak with a doctor, and at the time, the surgery that I required was rare, and they didn't even do it in my town. So they found a doctor in a different town that did, he wanted to do a permanent cerclage. And so he did that before I got pregnant. And in 2008, I got pregnant with my daughter. And I have to tell you, I was so worried because my brain only remember ever, having premature children and never leaving the hospital with a baby. And so looking back, I'm like, wow, that pregnancy, it went really well, but I was such an emotional wreck because of all the past situations. Fortunately, I had a doctor who was amazing. I was with a specialist at that time, and I really felt heard and listened to by them. And that's really, really important, especially when women are going through this process, to really have a doctor that that will listen to them, and that will, say what you're feeling is real, and I want to do whatever I can to alleviate some of the anxiety and things like that. And I tell you, there were times where I look back now and feel like, oh, it was like a panic attack, because I was just like, something's wrong with the baby. And I would pull on the side of the road and I would be crying because I, just didn't know what was happening. And the baby was always fine, but it was in my mind, I was struggling. And so when I had talked with my doctor, the specialist, she said, I don't want you to worry yourself like this. And she said, so anytime that you feel that something is wrong, I want you to call me and come over to the office. And just that permission to come over and just check things out really took a weight off, because then I didn't feel like, I didn't feel guilty for now wanting to go and see the doctor or saying that something's wrong. I had this permission, that I could call her and she would be okay with me coming over. I did have weekly appointments instead. Typically, you go in every couple of weeks or depending on how far along, but I would go every week. And we sat down, and of course the insurance companies don't like to pay for ultrasounds, more than a couple. They like to, so with that being said, my doctor, kept saying, nope, she needs an ultrasound. And that ultrasound really was to ease my mind. And it was so helpful. And it was great that she was an advocate for me to say, no, my patient really needs this. And this is something that I suggest that happens every week. One of the things that we talked about too was that I would not get any vaginal checks, because a lot of times I was having infections. And so I felt like, all these vaginal ultrasounds may be contributing. I just didn't know, but I felt it was great that I had somebody that was listening and was okay with me expressing how I felt and willing to listen. So, again, this was a struggle for me because I had so many losses before. And I had a friend of mine say to me, I want you to visualize your child. Visualize you bringing her home. Visualize you getting on the bus, or her getting on the bus for her first day of kindergarten. And it really was a mind reset that I needed to do. Because like I mentioned before, my mind only remembered having a child, never leaving the hospital with them, them dying. So it was like this recording that played in my mind over and over again. And so I feel like that him telling me that really, really helped change my mindset. And then I named, her name was Imani, which meant faith, and something that I really needed in that time. And I was able to say, Imani, mommy's here. And I would talk to her before she was born. Because prior to that, after having so many losses, I would not have baby showers ahead of time. There were so many things that I felt really detached from the baby, because I felt like if something happens, I don't want to have, bonded with this baby. I don't want to have given it a name and all of these things. And so it was almost like I turned the corner mentally and started doing some things differently. And not to say that's always going to be the thing that gets you, to the next level. But for me, it was alleviated some of the stress that I was putting on myself by thinking a different way. And so, we went on, and Imani was born. I did have the permanent cerclage, and we kind of went from there. So that's kind of my story with her.
Yes. So let's talk about your journey in your postpartum period with her. How did that go as you were navigating the grief and the loss of your other babies with now parenting, this live baby, this baby that you have on earth? How was that journey for you?
Well, so there was two things, because I believe that, with the other children, I was grieving and suffering from postpartum depression. And everything may not have been paid attention to, because they were like, oh, you just lost a baby, so it's got to be you're grieving this child. And in reality, it could have been that. Well, I'm sure it was a little bit of that, but I also feel like it was postpartum depression as well. And because I had all the symptoms, I came home, leaky breast. I stayed home for work for 3 months, because when you have a child, you're in New York, where I lived, you're able to take the family leave for 3 months. So I was grieving, but I do feel like there were some other elements to it as well. So, and that's with all the children, with Imani, it felt much better. I was nervous, but I also, and I think too, a little part of me felt like, you should be happy. This outcome was so different and things like that. But I was very nervous, as I didn't want anything to happen to her. I wanted to make sure I was doing everything right. Imani was born premature, but only because my blood pressure was elevated, and the doctor said to me, I can do more for this baby outside than in. So she was born 6 weeks premature, and did really well. She stayed in the hospital for about 7 days, and then she came home. And it was getting used to having a child. My husband was very helpful in just helping me navigate through being a new mom, and the emotional part of it, getting used to nursing and all those things. So it was great bringing her home. It was an adjustment, though, just trying to navigate being a mom and having that anxiety of, gosh, I don't want anything to happen to her. So that was a lot of it earlier on.
Yes, absolutely. And I can attest to those feelings of both dichotomies, like grieving, experiencing some form of postpartum depression, and then not really being diagnosed, and then trying to care for this child and go and experience motherhood as it's always what you desired, but you still have this other part that's still heavy on your mind. So I'm happy that you shared that. What other tools or resources or things that were done back then? I mean, I feel like, I think now, like you mentioned before, there's more it's more readily available. But even when you were going and navigating through your journey of IVF and infertility treatments, did you have a community? Do you have people that you could lean on during that time frame?
I didn't have a community. I didn't have a community, and there were some parts of me back then, being, a Christian and growing up in the church and in the African American community in general. It wasn't, as celebrated. You having a baby, using IVF or having frozen embryos. I remember people saying, well, if God wanted you to have a baby, you would have one. And so this whole, idea of using frozen embryos that were mine and my husband's, or any kind of assistance, in a sense of, scientific things that they were using, were frowned upon. So in many cases, I couldn't talk about it to certain people because I felt like they just didn't understand, and there was going to be a level of judgment about the way that my husband and I had chose to move forward in having children. So, but there wasn't a lot of communities out there that with folks that looked like me, or not, that I knew of, and the doctors weren't even recommending, hey, why don't you connect with these folks? It's more now that they're talking about it everywhere, which is fantastic, because women do need support going into it as well as while you're in it, to kind of know what's going to happen. The whole IVF process in itself is a lot. It's and the doctors, the doctors I had in the fertility clinic I went to did a great job with trying to prepare me. But it was, the day after when you get a call and say, sorry, it didn't take, or, we're going to have to start this process over again after you've been giving yourself shots and things. And I did work in a school at a time. And I remember my husband would give me the shots every day, and he had to go out of town for work. And so I'm kind of at the school, at the nurse's office, like, would you be able to give me this shot? And she's like, absolutely. And so, even that, I was like, what am I going to do? There's so many pieces to it. And certainly if you're spending this money to do it, you certainly don't want to miss a step or whatever. So it was interesting trying to navigate all of the pieces, going to the doctors every other day or what have you. One of the things after I had my son in 2005, I was in emotional wreck, and here I am. I had a baby. I was so used to being pregnant for 5, almost 6 months, that it was like, wow, I'm not pregnant anymore. I just had a baby, and here I am, and what do I do now? And so I remember we got home, and my husband said to me, let's go. And I said, go where? And he said, we went to North Carolina. We got a hotel. And honestly, I was angry, because I was like, I don't want to go anywhere. I just had a baby. My baby just died. It was the best thing for me in that time, because I needed to remove myself from the house. I needed to put my mind somewhere else. I was in a different town, and I was able to grieve and just kind of be away from the environment, and that was really helpful. Eventually, I don't even think I did a lot of counseling. It was more so, yes, you're depressed. Let's give you these pills that will help. And in all reality, that helps maybe the way you're feeling, but it's always going to be a situation that you live with. So it's not helping you. It doesn't give you the tools on how to navigate through the emotions of it. It's just trying to mask it. And the situation, it will never go away. So I really needed the tools on how do you deal with this. One of the things is, journaling and trying to, and talking about my child. because as you know, when you lose the child, a year later, no one's calling you and saying, hey, today's your baby's birthday. Or they may call that 1 year later, but they're not calling after that. And so as you're celebrating kind of your child by yourself, in many ways you feel like no one else is celebrating, my child, they were here, they lived, and all of those things. So it's a lot of things. It's a lot of emotions and putting them in different categories and trying to peel back the layers of everything you're feeling. Every year that you celebrate this child's birthday is one heartache. Christmas, you're thinking, oh my gosh, my baby this would be their first Christmas. And so it became, those months were very difficult for me. They're, the birthdays of the babies, or their due dates, what they would, all of those things became very difficult. And I really did need to see somebody and start to think about how do you manage these emotions. And it became very helpful for me when I was able to talk to other women and help them, and to give them maybe some suggestions on what they could ask their doctor. Have you tried this? Have you thought about this? Or just being able to listen to other women and share, and then also coming up with my own ways to celebrate my children, instead of always looking for someone to, they should be calling me and talking about my child. Like, no, you can celebrate your child in your own special way. And it didn't need to be, it could be different every year, but it was something that I could do to celebrate my child. Now, we remember our children all the time, every day, but those special occasions as far as their birthdays and anniversary dates, we want to celebrate. And so that was my thing. I said, I'm going to celebrate my child. I would do things like, I don't know if you could see it, but I have this necklace with all their names on it. And so people often say to me, oh, what is that? Or we love that. And I said, it's my children's names, because one of the hardest things for me in the beginning was people would say, oh, is she your only child? And I said, how do I answer that? And there was a time where I just said, I don't have the energy to say no or tell my story to a stranger. And so, those kinds of things were tough. Even when I would go to the doctor and they would say, is this your first pregnancy? And I would say no. And they would say, well, how many do you have? Or how many times have you been pregnant? And, by the time I'm saying, I've been pregnant 7 times. How many children do you have? 1. How many miscarriages? 1. How many tubals? 1. It became very difficult. And I had my doctor who stood up for me and said, listen, I don't want you to ask her this question anymore. I want you, let's put this in her chart and do not ask her anymore. And even things like after I had my children, I remember I was on the floor, on the labor and delivery floor, and all night, all I could hear were babies crying because I was on that floor. And it took someone to say, I struggled with it. And I just said, I don't want to be on a floor where I'm hearing babies all the time. So the next time when I was in there, they put me on a different floor. And so I think many times they learn from us. And I just had to be comfortable with speaking up about it and saying, this is what I want. This is what I think will be helpful for me. And picking the right person as well. Certainly I tell friends, that have gone through this, if you feel that this person is not a good match for you, it's okay to say, this person is not a good match for me. And not feel like you're going to get that person in trouble or they're going to lose their job, but just say, you know what, this person is not a good match for me. And is there someone else that I can be connected with? So really, that's what was helpful for me, being able to advocate for myself, to feel comfortable about it, and share with the doctors what I needed, what I felt that I needed to move forward.
I love that. So, what encouraging words can you leave with our listeners as we go and navigate this new year, 2023? Because we're still in a pandemic. I know
Yes.
that a lot of people have goals of getting pregnant, staying pregnant, bringing a healthy baby home in the new year. What encouraging words can you leave with our listeners as they navigate the new year?
I'm a spiritual person, so really I had to draw strength from my faith. And a lot of times, and I have to be honest, where I was questioning God, and I would say, God, why is this keep happening? And there were times, if I'm being honest, where I said, God, I would rather you not allow me to get pregnant than to get pregnant and lose this child. I certainly didn't want to hear all those things that you hear from people. Well, it's God's will and it's this and that. I didn't want to hear any of that. And none of us do, but for me, I really had to pray, and I really had to say, God, this is what I desire. But understand as well that this may not happen in the way that I'm looking for it to happen, and to be open to some other way, whether it would be adoption. And I feel like once I was able to release that, because that's what I wanted so badly, that I felt better. And in the last pregnancy with my daughter, I felt calmer. And so as moving on, I just encourage women to really continue to keep, find a positive space. It can be very, very challenging. Find someone, a trusted community that you can really share, and you can and be able to share when you need to, and not feel like it's a burden or it's a problem. Because I felt like in that situation, it would have released a lot of the stress and anxiety that I felt. And I really felt for families who were going through IVF during the pandemic, because I said, wow, do they stop in the middle? Do they not start? Or children who, or families who had children in the NICU. You start to really think about all those steps that you went through when you were, trying to get pregnant or having children, what families are going through in the midst of a pandemic. But I do encourage folks to visualize seeing yourself pregnant, visualize yourself having, delivering a healthy baby, taking a baby home from the hospital. All of those things really, really helped me, because for me, I did need a mindset reset. And that's, what I always say is for myself, there was so much anxiety and detachment because I was afraid. So really having some folks that you can call and say, I'm struggling today. Can we talk? Or having a doctor that you really can talk to, and as well as therapy, and maybe somebody who looking for somebody who a therapist that has experience in this situation that can really help you channel some of that anxiety and fear that you may have.
I love this. So where can we connect with you after this episode?
So I am on social media under Dyneco, Dyneco. I don't have any specific groups, but I had joined this group when I got on social media, and just the information that I gathered from you, and I loved it, because I saw someone who looked like me, and I saw folks talking about it openly, and being able to really, really help women, because there's a whole lot of different experiences, and there's a lot of times there's a lot of questions that maybe just not, you don't want to get from your doctor, but you might get from some other folks that have been in this situation. So those are things that I've done in the past, just reach out to communities. And really it's just been, since the pandemic, where more folks are on social media and you're able to connect with different groups. Before that, I believe it was pretty, isolated, where there were folks, talking about it, but I just wasn't as connected because I wasn't on social media as much on Instagram. So it was wonderful to be able to have this community, especially when the world kind of shut down and you may not be face to face with somebody, but you can, be connected through a community via social media. So I just want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing, and the information that you share is so helpful and so powerful, especially to Black women. And it's so appreciated.
No, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story and your light. And I look forward to connecting with you after this episode.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we got you recorded.